Hello, everybody. I'm Matt Carvalho, and with me is my guest at this time, candidate for Atlarge Pawtucket City Council seat, Emmanuel Echevarria. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me, Matt.
All right. Now, my first question I'd like to ask you is a general question. What is it that made you want to get into politics and to run for this seat?
So, I've been living in Pawtucket the last 25 years of my life. My family moved to this country from Peru, and when I was 5 years old, this was the only town that I knew was home, and ever since then, my life has been centered around Pawtucket, and I have a vested interest in this city having every opportunity to thrive. My wife and I met at home in high school, where we both attended, and we have 3 kids, and we own a home on Woodhaven Road. Therefore, I'm here to stay. I would like to contribute whatever I can to make my city better. And I believe that getting involved in running for local office is a good way for me to bring my professional experience and also my passion and my commitment and try to create a meaningful change.
Now, I believe you work at the Providence City Hall, correct?
Yes, I work for the city of Providence.
Now, working there, what have you learned and taken away from that job that you'll be able to contribute as a city councilman from working in that sort of environment?
Yeah, so my title in the city of Providence is Chief Innovation and Performance Officer. And although that title sounds broad, it focuses on improving government services, looking at our bottom line and seeing how we can create financial efficiencies in how government delivers services, but also evaluating and measuring government programs so that when we're funding initiatives that we know work and that will have a positive impact on the services we want to provide. So I believe that experience, in learning how to look at a process, identify flaws, waste, and opportunity is something that city council folks should always take into consideration, especially when approving a budget. Now, I go through a $740 million budget here and try to find efficiencies, and I believe that critical eye in evaluating government programs, evaluating government services, and investing in the desired outcomes for our residents is experience that doesn't currently exist on the council, and I would like to enhance the way that we do that.
Okay. Now, one of the major issues in the city of Pawtucket right now is everything going on with McCoy Stadium and the Paw Sox, and now hundreds of people are at risk of losing their jobs at the stadium. What are your thoughts on this entire issue? What do you think should be done, and what are your thoughts on Mattiello's plan that he recently came up with?
Yeah, so the Pawtucket Stadium is obviously a very sensitive one because it does involve jobs. It involves a big financial investment on the part of the city and the state. And it's also one that goes back to our roots as a city. So I think most people in Pawtucket, including myself, would like to see the Pawtucket stay, would like to see the stadium, would like to see the stadium attract people. But my concern with the entire proposal, even with the recent updates, is it's not really clear what our exit strategy is if the hope for increased attendance isn't met. So right now the plan kind of hinges on the more attendance that comes in, the more solvent or the more probable that investment is to generate a return. And my concern is what happens to taxpayers' property values and property taxes if the owners of the stadium can't make do on that increased attendance. So until we have a good exit clause in that contract that allows us to walk away without an impact to Pawtucket taxpayers, I don't know that I can support this deal.
All right. Another major issue that's been already hurting people in Pawtucket is Memorial Hospital and its closing. What do you think should be done with this? Do you think the current owner should sell? What do you think should be done in order for Pawtucket to get a hospital back in the city?
The outcome that I want, at least intermittently, is we definitely need, at the very least, an emergency room. Pawtucket is facing a lot of adverse consequences because other emergency rooms are now getting backed up. The waiting periods are much longer. The transportation time for ambulances is obviously increasing because we don't have a hospital in Pawtucket. And I think for an urban environment to not have accessible medical care is a travesty, frankly. So I don't know what the mechanism exactly is to get there, but at the very least we need an emergency room, and Pawtucket frankly does need a hospital.
And now, if elected, what would your plan be to try to get this to happen, to get at least an emergency room or better a hospital?
So that would depend on what the purview of the council is on this, right? And so because this is private business, the city doesn't necessarily get to decide how the property is sold or what the deal is that enables that transaction to happen. But I would support it and be a very vocal proponent that we do need an emergency room in Pawtucket, and I would make sure to work with state-level officials and other parties of interest to rally the community around that message and do everything that we can to make it possible.
Now, another one of the probably biggest issues that's been going on in the city is everything going on with the trash transfer station. Now, what do you think should be done with this? Do you think we should move it? Do you think it should stay? Do you think maybe get rid of the one we currently have completely? What do you think should be done with all of this?
So let me just say two things on this before I answer your question. One is I am opposed to all of the iterations of the transfer station plan on Concord Street that I've heard so far. I don't think there's been a cogent idea that doesn't impact property value, that doesn't impact safety, and that doesn't impact the burden on our residents. You know, I think we've had a lot of half-baked ideas here. I've spoken with Councilman Tim Rudd on this, and I would really favor for us to look at how do we get green energy involved in the current transfer station so that our residents could potentially at least lessen the harm that that does on the environment and also on property values by trying to incentivize either a solar program there. I think we really need to get away from the theory of let's get another trash station or let's get deeper involved in the trash business. The other thing that I would say to that is the real problem here and the root cause of a lot of issues in our city is infrastructure. So we don't maintain public property. We don't maintain public buildings. And that's an investment that I really want to make when we're approving budget allocations, which is we need to earmark spend so that we don't let our buildings get to the point where they're crumbling, where they're unsafe, where employees are at risk, and then we have to build new ones or completely overhaul them because we've never done preventative maintenance. So I think like there are two strategies. One is to treat the symptom and ensure that we're making capital improvements, but the other one is to treat the disease and make sure that as time goes on, we're setting aside funds so that we're preventing issues like this from happening again by regularly maintaining public buildings, and that also includes schools.
Now, something that would maybe help with this issue is maybe the business climate to get funds. What do you plan to do to increase the business climate, to bring small businesses here, to help the economy of Pawtucket in order to do other things here in the city?
Yeah, I would like to learn from best practices that other cities have deployed. If you look around Pawtucket, if you go to Seekonk, if you go to Attleboro, if you even go to Providence, you will see a lot of development happening. Stores are opening, businesses are opening at a much more rapid and accelerated rate than what they are in Pawtucket. And that's because those municipalities have invested in their infrastructure. Businesses want to go to where they know sidewalks, streets, public property is good because they know they'll have an easier time kind of settling in, and they also don't have to worry about the beautification of their city that they're in, right? So we put a lot of burden on our current business climate to make up for the lack of resources that the city has had. I spoke with a group of downtown merchants and business owners who expressed that they go out and clean the streets, they go out and plant flowers, plant trees, and that's an unfair burden to them as they're starting up. The city should really do more to invest in itself. Now, to stimulate business growth and to stimulate people coming in, I want to remove a lot of the red tape in our business licensing process. That's a project that I actually have experience in Providence, where we digitize and put that entire process online. So small business didn't have to shut down and potentially lose hundreds of dollars just because they're dealing with city hall processes.
Now, I was recently at a city council meeting, right? And in the meeting, the particular bill they were talking about was in regards to stores in the city of Pawtucket. They wanted to make it a ban where they couldn't sell things like flavored chewing tobacco, e-cigarettes, the wraps, things like that. Now, one of the major complaints was because they decided to pause the bill, but if they decided to pass that bill, it would hurt the businesses in Pawtucket because they could go to, say, North Providence or Lincoln. What are your thoughts on this? What do you think this should maybe be moved to the state and make it a state issue? Do you think the city should deal with this and pass it, or do you think should be done with all of this?
Yeah, so I mean, there are a couple of key factors there. One is that the state already has a lot of tobacco regulation. Municipalities are really trying to fill the gaps for what the state doesn't address, which is the sale of flavored tobacco. That's been known to target children and minors. Therefore, a lot of municipalities are strongly considering passing bans on the sale of flavored tobaccos or even coupon usage for tobacco sales. That to me seems like a public health initiative that I would support, frankly. We don't want children becoming dependent on tobacco and nicotine as they grow older. And like I said, these programs explicitly target them. I would like to make sure that there's some enforcement happening if that were to happen. So you can't just pass legislation without an enforcement mechanism and a consequence. And tobacco is a very lucrative business. Businesses that are not selling flavored tobacco, and frankly, Providence has a ban on flavored tobacco. So the fact that they said they would move here, to me, kind of nullifies the argument because that same ban exists here. We need to make sure that there's a way to enforce that the sale of that tobacco is prohibited.
Now, I don't want to go too over the time limit, but I do want to ask you one last question that I usually like to ask local and state officials on this. It's a bit of a national thing. What are your thoughts on the job performance and administration of our current president?
I go by the mantra of if you have nothing nice to say, don't say anything at all. I'll make an exemption here. I think that this administration in particular is causing a lot of anxiety for everyday Americans, not just on the politicized social issues, but even on economic ones. You know, it's very difficult to have a commander-in-chief who behaves in such an unpredictable manner, and that I'm surprised it hasn't had an impact on the markets, but it does have an impact on the populace. I mean, the rhetoric has unfortunately disintegrated into a deplorable state, and our economy may be damaged as a result of some of these policies that just come about, you know, without any forewarning or foreshadowing and without any build-up. And I think unpredictability is not what you want your president to be known for.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here for a few minutes to answer these questions. I really appreciate it.
Matthew, if I can just make one more plug. The special election in Pawtucket is June 5th, which is this upcoming Tuesday. So I encourage all of your listeners to please come out and vote, become educated on the issues and understand where your potential representative stands on everything. And I really encourage people to come out and vote. There's nothing more important than participating in our democracy.
But before I let you go, would you also be able, if you know off the top of your head, where the polls will be on that day?
Yeah, so there's one per district. There's a list on the Board of Canvassers website, but District 6, I believe, is Kennedy Manor on 175 Broad Street. District 5 is St. Germain Manor. District 4 is a Portuguese Social Club on School Street. District 3 is St. Teresa School. District 2 is Burns Manor. And District 1 is a Portuguese Club on Benefit Street.
Okay, well, all right. Well, I'm sure hopefully many people go to vote, and I wish you the best of luck. And again, thank you for being here.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. All right.
Take care.
Bye. You too. Bye.
Bye.